Welcome to You Can't Be Pretty and Smart. Well, at least not at the same time. We are your hosts, Zacchary Powell and John Zambarano.
Today, we will be discussing Brat, the new critically acclaimed Charli XCX album, and the Brat Summer that she hath brought into the world.
As we move forward, excuse me, towards Venus's ingress into Leo, we reach the Venus return of last year's retrograde, the now infamous summer that contained the writers and actors strikes, the end of many high-profile relationships, and the wildly successful press tour and premieres of Barbie.
That summer was definitely a reckoning that brought us into all a new place in our lives and in our relationships. And it seems that we would not have been able to arrive at this year's iconic Brat Summer without last year's Barbie Summer. Zach, how are you?
You know, girl, I am forever exhausted. This Mars and Taurus needs to leave. Leave. Like I'm so over it. I'm so over it. And honestly, it only got worse when Saturn stationed retrograde. Like Saturn
Yeah.
stopping, like for me especially, Saturn being so prominent in my chart, like Saturn stopping completely in the sky, like I am fully stopped. We are all fully stopped,
Yeah.
but like I just feel lethargic AF.
Yeah.
But you know, we're powering through. We're trying to persevere with very few martial resources to do so, but trying our best. I'm so excited to discuss what we're discussing today because it's really like it just like weirdly we were trying like discussing our different ideas or the different things that were coming up for us. Like it didn't seem like it was going to connect, and I'm just like it's so
And it
beautiful
did.
how it like just came together because of course the gods are behind us.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, wind
Um,
in our sails, Mama. How are you?
yeah, I'm also just fucking exhausted.
So tired.
Today I was like, so I'm going into a week of mornings starting tomorrow, and today I was
Meaning
like,
morning shifts at your job,
morning shifts
not
at
week
my
of mornings where you're gonna like mourn some things.
morning. I mean, I will mourn my sleep because it will not
Sleep,
happen,
yeah, right.
but
Truly.
a week of morning shifts. And so today I was like, okay, I need to get up at like 8 o'clock. That way
Yeah,
I will go to bed early and
yeah,
like
yeah.
I will fully woke up at 10:30. Uh
She's
and
a
was
night
like,
girly. I
well,
get it.
here we are.
Yeah.
And just like I guess it's anecdotally related to Saturn. I am in the process of watching Sailor Moon from start to finish. So I've like seen it in like bits and pieces,
Ooh.
like growing up, but I've
Yeah.
never sat down and like watched it from the beginning to the end. So I'm about halfway through. There's 200 episodes, and I think I just today finished episode. It was like 114, so I'm
Oh my
basically halfway through.
gosh.
But I just spoilers. Sorry if you haven't seen Sailor Moon. It's out older than I am, so like
Yeah, like get over
spoiler
it.
warning, like whatever. I just got the episode today where Sailor Saturn is introduced as a character, or like you don't know it's her, but you like
Mhm.
I know it's her because, but they don't say like, she has not revealed herself as Sailor Saturn yet.
But you know,
But
right.
I know, and she has come into the show, so I was like, oh, Saturn retrograde in my 10th,
Yeah.
and Sailor Saturn is popping up in
Yeah.
Sailor Moon. It was really funny.
I mean, I remember now that I called you or we were texting back and forth. I can't remember what it was. Oh no, yeah, we were just texting. But I went on my walk and then I like stopped and there were at least 40 crows
Yeah,
just like digging through dirt. And I was like, what even is this, omen or not? And you were like, Saturn stationing retrograde. And I was like, absolutely. Hundo
yeah,
P,
that.
duh. Like literally duh. There were obviously other things that happened that we can't talk about, but it was
There
just
were.
for me in
Oh,
10th house areas.
oh yeah.
Um,
I was like, wait, there was.
was there something? Yes, there was. But it was a really loud omen seeing that many crows just digging through the dirt.
Yeah,
Newly tilled dirt. Like it's just like, yeah, Saturn, hello.
yeah, Saturn does.
Um, so
But
yeah,
yeah,
let's dive in.
all right.
So to kind of start us off, what is the Brat Summer? What's going on, John? What is this phenomenon going
Of
all
Brat
on?
Summer.
Yeah, Brat Summer going on and TikTok and all around.
So I Charlie XCX. I'm like one of her biggest fans. She's consistently been my like top Spotify artist for like
Mm,
it's always either her or SZA. They have been for the past like five
sure,
years, like battling it out. Because I'm
Hondo
what
P.
an F word.
An F word, period.
And it was so funny when she released the cover for this album. It was literally just this like lime green, and then in like this sans serif basic ass font
What?
just says
It's okay.
Brat. And
Right,
everyone
right, right.
was like, this is so fucking stupid. Like, what are you
Yes,
doing? Turned out to
yeah,
be maybe the smartest marketing play she's
absolutely.
ever done. Because
Hondo P.
anytime I see that shade of green, I'm now just
Think
like,
of her.
Brat, in the Brat Summer, which is fully just about being psychotic, living living your best life with your girls, not listening to what other people, especially men, have to tell you, and making the best of this world that is actively falling apart around us, given
fully
things that have happened, especially over the last few days. Like,
Mama, we're not talking about it, but we're thinking about
like,
it. We're thinking about it.
Holy
I'm trying
hell.
so hard not
to think about it. I would like to forget.
I might fall to pieces. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But yeah, that's at least what Brat Summer is for me, especially because the album is full of literal just bangers. Like, there's like 2 or 3 songs that are like slower, or like there's one song that she has dedicated to Sophie that's like pretty sad. And like there's a video of her like crying talking about it. So like, yeah. But the other like 9 or 10 songs are like bops, like you just want to go out and like shake your ass and do some hard drugs and like live your best life.
Yeah.
That's Brat Summer.
I love. And so obviously, since I love Charli XCX, but you are the fan. And so I would love to hear.
I am the stan.
You're the stan. You are. And so I want to hear so much. I want to hear about like the album, its release, like Charli's astrology, because honestly, I mean, as a person who, again, like, of course, I'm an F word as well. So of course I know who she is. I know, like, she's been like if one could argue, like a cult classic. Like, she's popular on TikTok, like popular with the gays, popular with the queers, popular with all the girlies. But like, this album is like, I don't know what it was, and you will tell me, but I don't know what it was, but it like everything, she exploded, right?
She exploded into the public sphere.
I think one key thing was it was really fucking good marketing, like really, really good marketing. And so talk to us about like the album release, the astrology of that, the astrology that she's going through, and also, you know, like of like her, I know she had been going through transitions with labels, and maybe like moving to Atlantic Records was like the impetus to be like, hey, marketing, let's go. Let's really do a massive push online, and especially on TikTok. I mean, she also is churning out like nonstop videos on TikTok using the song. What is it, 365?
So there's 360 and 365.
360, okay.
360, I think, is the one that's getting the most mainstream, but 365 is the best song.
Okay. I wasn't crazy. Okay. No. I was like, I know what it is, but I
360 is the album opener, and 365 is the song that ends the album. So they sandwich the album very nicely. Yes.
So talk to us about all the astrology. What's going on?
Okay, so Miss Charlotte Atchison was born.
Yes. May.
Well, I got the government name. So Charli, I'm gonna show her chart like super briefly because I don't want to like have my screen shared basically the whole time, but just so the people listening or watching the video version, and I will describe the chart as best I can. This is Charli's chart. If you want to plug it in yourself, she was born August 2nd, 1992 at 2:25 in the morning in Cambridge, England.
Leo.
She has the sun, Mercury, and Venus all in Leo, which is, we'll talk about the Venus retrograde in Leo and it kind of passing over all of her placements at one point. She's 5 degrees Cancer rising with the moon and Jupiter in Virgo, Saturn retrograde in Aquarius, Mars in Gemini with the South Node in Gemini and the North Node in Sag. So that is like the basics of her chart. The cool thing about her this album specifically, and the reason that I think it rose to so much prominence, is number one, because it's her first post Saturn return album. Every other album that she has created, every other album, mixtape, EP that she has released has been either during or pre her Saturn return. This is the first album that she has released outside of the Saturn return, which I think obviously will show growth as an artist. Saturn had moved over her midheaven. She's in midheaven at 0 Pisces. So Saturn had moved over her midheaven early last year. She was originally signed to this label that she has openly really despised. So she signed to her first label when she was 17. Yeah, she was like 17, 16, like young woman just trying to like kind of make it in music. And the original agreement was for 5 albums with them. So she signed to Asylum in 2010, which if you look at kind of what was going on for her, she had just began so in August of 2010. I couldn't find the exact month that she was signed. However, she turned 18 in 2010. Yeah, she turned 18 in 2010. So at some point in the first half of 2010, while she was still 17, she signed to this album and quickly began an Antar Dasha, which is a level 2 Dasha ruled
Oh,
by
okay.
K2 in August of 2010. So around her 18th birthday, she began this K2 dasha on her like level
Period.
2.
Yeah.
And like decision making isn't always the best when you're in your K2 dasha. There's this idea of like feeling
Mm,
lost or like wandering. It's the
mm.
south node. Like there's no head. There's no vision. There's not
Yeah,
really
no,
a place
okay. I see
that
what
you're
you're saying.
looking towards. Like she just was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I'm just gonna sign this contract because it was offered to me. And I'm a
Yeah.
17-year-old just like trying to make music.
Yeah, right. I'm
Um,
an artist.
I'm an artist, mama. I've got the Leo stellium. I'm an artist.
Period.
And then she quickly moved into her Rahu Dasha on the main level and is still in her Rahu Dasha because the Rahu Dasha
Mm.
lasts 18 years. And so she started that when she was 18 or 19.
Oh, so that K2 period wasn't very long.
The K2 period, no, on the sub level was not super long.
Okay.
I'm going to pull up her Vedic chart super quick so I can get actual dates.
Yeah.
The K2 period was towards the middle of her Mars Dasha, on the level 1. K2 lasted from August of 2010 to January of 2011. So like
Okay.
5 months, not very long at all.
Yeah.
She did not release her first album until she released True Romance, which was literally like a month after she started her Rahu Dasha on the main level. True Romance released April of 2013, and she started Rahu at the end of February of 2013. So like, and she's in Rahu until February 2031. So like, she's fully sitting pretty in that Rahu Dasha, which I mean makes sense. Rahu's in her 7th. It's like it's fallen, so there's this idea of like needing to prove something or like needing to be different and like attracting her audience with it in the 7th. And all of her albums since then have been released in this Rahu Dasha. The thing about the contract that she signed was that it was for 5 albums, and her label wanted her to just like be a pop girly, like a very generic, like run of the mill. I want you to make pop albums. And she, if you've listened to some of her earliest music, like True Romance and Number One Angel, like it's pretty like generic pop, but there's still, you hear the seeds of like where she is now as like a hyper pop and like heavy synth pop artist.
Chaotic.
It's chaotic. I've described it as Transformers having sex to people because like sometimes that's what it sounds like.
So
like
interesting.
It can, sometimes it sounds like just noise. One of her more popular pieces that she released was an EP called Pop 2. And that is when I became a Charli fan. That was 2017, maybe. Yes, very end of 2017, just before Christmas. She's in Rahu Jupiter at this point. Jupiter is on her Aruda Lagna, which is like her point of perception in the chart. So it makes sense that this would be an album that is like maybe a little different or maybe like a lot more her than her other pieces had been. And because it wasn't an album, she could do it not under her label.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because it's an EP technically. It's 10 songs. Like it's not short, but it is not an album. So it was not under her label, so she could be a little more experimental. It's like it.
And I wonder if she perhaps did that on purpose as a way to actually get away with doing.
And that's exactly. This is after she had been meeting up with A.G. Cook and Sophie, who were 2 of her like. A.G. Cook was one of the lead producers on BRAT, and that like this style of music is very, very like A.G. is regarded as like one of the greatest hyperpop artists probably of all time. And she still actively is collabing with him, and he was like one of the lead producers on BRAT, which I think really helped with like the sonic perspective that she was going for. But this Pop 2 EP, I keep saying album even though it's really not, really like paved the way for the music that she is doing now. The Pop 2 was end of 2017. She still had a few more albums. She released Charli, which is one of my favorite Charli albums. It was not received very well, especially by the fans. The fans don't love Charli. I don't know what it is. I think Charli is phenomenal as an album. It might be because it was the first Charli album that I like listened to like as it came out. Like I listened to Pop 2 after it came out and was like, oh my God, who is this crazy bitch? And then when Charli came out, I was like fully a stan. So I was like, oh my God, I'm waiting till midnight to hear this album. Super good. Still under her label. That was September 2019. I think. Yes, September 2019, she releases Charli. She is in Rahu Saturn at this point now. So like a very malefic period for her. And she's still very vocal about like, I just need to make albums really to get out of my label at this point. End of 2019, we move into the pandemic era. She creates this album called How I'm Feeling Now, which is she produces and releases basically herself like in her house during the first like month of quarantine. That album got there's some pretty heavy hyper pop, like synth heavy songs on there, which I was surprised that her label like allowed that. I think it was like May of 2020. So I think they were just like, we need things out.
We need
like
yeah.
It's we're just
we need to make money.
We're kind of just glad that you're making music at this point.
Exactly.
So like just fucking do it.
Yeah.
So that's her 4th album that she releases with the label. 5th and final album, hilarious, because she finally is like, oh, you want like a basic pop girl album? Okay,
here it is.
Fine. She releases Crash, which was like a very well received album. Not as well received as Brat. Brat is her most well received album, which was shocking to me. I did not think it was going to become as mainstream as it was. So she releases Crash,
like, truly huge.
Like everybody looks at this fucking shade of lime green and they're like, Brat. So she releases Crash. She is in Rahu Mercury at that point. Interestingly, she on her Spirit is in. If you look at her ZR, she's in an L2 peak period on her Spirit releasing, in the sign of Fortune. So,
okay,
definitely like
big one.
5th and final album. Like, okay, I'm free. I can like either choose to re-sign or sign somewhere else. She ends up signing with Atlantic. She has a 2-album deal with them. So, Brat was the first one. She will be releasing another one with them at some point, probably. Given how the album release given like the pattern of album release, we probably won't get it until late 2026. She usually goes through albums like every 2 to 2.5 years, which is interesting if you think about Saturn. Saturn is like that Saturn's moving through a sign almost basically. Right. She does have Saturn in curtailed passage, which is when it's almost when you have an outer or a superior planet, Mars, Jupiter, or Saturn, within 7.5 degrees opposing the sun. It is when they are moving the fastest in their retrograde. So she has that. She has the sun at like 10 Leo and Saturn is at 15 Aqua. So there is like Saturn is pretty loud in her chart, even though it is retrograde. It's moving the fastest that it will be moving throughout the whole retrograde period that it had in Aquarius at 92. So that is really interesting. Especially with Saturn ruling the 7th. And if you think about like the 7th as like the audience or like the people, if you're an artist, like the people that are fans, I guess would be, I always attribute to like the 7th. So yeah, then we come to Brat. She's in an 8th house Aquarius perfection ruled by that Saturn right now. She's closing it out next month when she turns 32. She'll be moving into her Pisces, but she's in Aquarius right now, ruled by that 8th house Saturn. The album gets released basically on the Venus Cazimi, in like a trine from that Saturn in her 12th. Like, I think it was like a lot has to do with like the timing of it all being really closely in that like air sign trine Saturn with Gemini. And it blew the fuck up. Like I'm so happy because I think she's such a phenomenal artist and I'm so glad. Like I've even had coworkers come up to me and be like, okay, so you've been listening to artists for a while, right? And I'm like, yeah, I was the fan for a while. I was
that girl. Okay,
I've been that girl.
I was a fan before you even knew who she was. What are you talking about?
But then it's funny having them like a few of them have gone back and like listened to her old music and it's like, I don't know. And I'm like, you have to. She was 18 when she released her first album, basically. So like, and she was like with this label that she didn't love and was like forcing her to be what she didn't want to be. I also think a lot of Brat has to do with she did recently get engaged to a man named George. So on one of the songs, Club Classics, one of the lines is like, I want to dance with George, I want to dance with AG. And so she's talking about AG Cook and her fiance George. Also on like a very basic level, green Venus, like it's alluring, it's attractive. Absolutely. Like it feels like there is so much Venus in this album, whether it is intentional or not. There's a song called Apple, like I think Venus Original Sin. Like I think so much of it is, I don't know if she's doing magic. I hope she is. Don't know if she is, but if she isn't, she should be. Because
it doesn't seem ridiculous that she's at least getting an astrologer to do. I mean, especially like obviously we're going to talk about this a bit more. Well, talk about Barbie in general, but like Chani Nicholas was able to confirm that there were astrologers on the marketing team for Barbie. So if they're doing it at movie studios, like they're gonna do it. Like if an artist is down, I'm sure they're gonna do it for a big record company as well. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and like with the timing of Brat, we've got like Venus Kazemi, Mars, who's her 10th lord, is in Aries in the 10th.
Aries, yeah. I mean,
the like she's in a Jupiter square, and Jupiter rules her midheaven. Like, there's so much context to her natal placements that like it feels like if she didn't have an astrologer then, she has one now, at least for this album. Because I went back and I looked at all of the album releases, and some of them I was like, I wouldn't have done this. Yeah. I wouldn't have released it at this time.
Which, I mean, honestly, just reflects like not knowing. I mean, you know, right? Like some things are just like meant to be, and like weirdly, I mean, I think it was Mercurius George, Jared. He's mentioned before, he's like, if you don't believe that like things happen astrologically, like for someone when it's really significant, then you don't actually believe in astrology. Like not everything is elective. Like, yes, true, hundo P. And also, this one
feels like it was more intentional. Absolutely.
Yeah, it does. Especially given that the other ones weren't as great. And then this one was like a little too good.
A little, yeah. Like Venus Kazemi. Like, yeah.
And the success was so instantaneous and so good, right? Like, and so big, like so big. And like they pushed, it was just like there was such, I feel like so much intentionality. Whereas like she almost felt like she wasn't fully this, but almost felt underground before.
Yeah, no, for sure. You could, I mean? Like, and she was not a prolifically known artist.
And now she's like mainstream pop girly. You know what I mean? Or mainstream, at least artist. I guess I don't mean to say. I know you're using terms very specifically, and so I don't.
No, but yeah, no, she's a pop girly. Yeah, no, she's a pop girly.
It's like this is like she has blown up, and that like requires a bit more intention. You know,
for sure. And like, if you look at all the album releases, they all like I looked at all of her solar returns, and all of the album releases occurred with the solar return had either Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces rising. Like all of them, where she had a year that she released an album.
Interesting.
Which is like her 159 trine. And like thinking in like a Vedic context, those are the trines of Dharma and the trines of purpose and the trines of like what you should be doing. Yes. So like astrology was astrology. Like she released all these albums while one of those houses was rising in her solar return. Like, yes, obviously. But this one, like the
little too
Lord of the 10th in the 10th, like Lord of the midheaven square, natal midheaven, Venus Kazemi, like it was all whoever her if she has an astrologer, you did that. Congrats.
You really did that.
And Charli, if you need an astrologer,
we're right here, mama.
But yeah, and like she's taken over all of social media. It was Daniel. So the 365 song at the end, if you haven't listened to it, you need to, because it's fucking phenomenal. One of the lines that she keeps repeating is bumping that, but in the context of music, but also in the context of doing cocaine.
Yeah, sure.
And Daniel, who's my partner, for those of you that don't know. I feel like everyone who listens to this at this point like knows us, so they know who we're talking about.
But hey, for new listeners,
Daniel is my partner.
Yeah.
They sent me a tweet that was it was just like a toilet that was that brat color green, and it said dumping that. But like it goes to show like the fucking genius of the marketing. Like you look at this green color and you're like bumping that. Like it's brat green. Yeah. So kudos, Charli. Love you.
Well, yeah, I mean, being able to see something and instantly know the reference, like that's good marketing.
That's incredible marketing.
And it's also so dumb, which is why it's such good marketing. Like it's so funny. Yeah.
It plays into this
like dumb, but
no, but it plays into the like queer, like I feel like a lot of queer humor nowadays is just like that's so fucking outlandish and like so dumb.
Yeah.
And like she knows that her fans are she knows that she makes music for fags. Like she absolutely like she knows. And so being able to just like play into that and being like, let me make this fucking stupid, dumb marketing that's gonna work.
Yeah.
Done.
I'm obsessed with that. And so Charli, I'm guessing this album had to have been somewhere like recorded or got pulled together somewhere around last summer. No,
I would assume so because Crash released the album directly prior to Brat was Crash, and that released March of 2022. So it's been over 2 years since we've gotten an album from her. She did work there. She has a song on the Barbie soundtrack. So she was
very Venus. That was the Venus Retrograde.
That was the Venus Retrograde. And so sonically,
Yeah.
that song sounds like if it was not on Barbie, sounds like it could have been on Brat.
Oh,
So I would
interesting.
assume that she was making the album, like was
Yeah.
heavy in making that album at that point, especially because it feels like such a summery album. Like she released it just before the
Mm.
Cancer Ingress, and like it felt so apt. Like it was like even like coming out during Pride Month, I was like, oh, every gay club is
Just
going to be
before the Cancer Ingress, like this year, you
of
mean?
this year.
You
Yeah, she
released it. Yeah,
released
you
it.
released.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
right, right.
And
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
remember hearing it for the first time and being like, oh, this is going to be at every single Pride event that I go to,
Yeah.
because it was just so like poppy and you can like shake your ass to it
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we've been you and I have been obviously talking about like this album, and like different things that I certainly that I've been looking at that you've been looking at that like kind of like seem to be a reflection. Because I mean, I guess to give away the thing that we have been doing with this podcast is like really kind of being intentional about being guided somewhat divinely. Like we
Mm-hmm.
have like deities that are associated with that have like really guided us to do this podcast in the first place. And I felt like we felt like you know, the way we wanted to approach this album was to or this album. Oh my God. We've been talking about albums and like, oh my God. The way we wanted to approach this podcast was really to was was to kind of like see what inspired us in the
Yeah,
moment and really listen to that.
and just run with it.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And so like there were things that, and I will talk about what I looked up too. There were things that just came up that was like, what even is this? Like I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like what we're like,
why am I being called to look at the astrology of
yes,
Charli XCX? I don't know,
yeah, no,
but like,
no,
but we'll talk
exactly.
about it.
And like you had one, I had one other thing, and I was like, what is there a connection? I hope there's a connection. And one the connection was this Venus retrograde
Venus.
in Leo, and this the return currently
Mm-hmm.
of currently, excuse me, in a little bit, Venus will be moving into Leo,
Mm-hmm.
it being like, and that being the return of Venus after she was retrograde in Leo last
Mm-hmm.
year, last summer. And this summer, excuse me, that summer was like infamous, like huge, massive. There were so many things that happened, right? There was the SAG-AFTRA strikes. They started in July 14th and ended in November. You know, we had the writers' strike that happened, I think, a little bit earlier with a Mercury retrograde first, and still lasted quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And we had like wild celebrity breakups that were so visible. There was, which one was it? It was like there was Hugh Jackman got divorced, which like they've been together for like 20 something years. That happened like it's September 15th, right after Venus stationed
Right,
retrograde.
or right after
Oh,
the
excuse me,
direct.
excuse me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sofia Vergara it broke up with John
Joe
Mang
Mangana.
hot man who was Wolf in what's it
In
in
True Blood.
True Blood. Hottie,
He
hottie.
also now,
But
okay,
they
have you seen that he hosts this like really weird game show now that's like, it's called
no.
Dealer No Deal Island. And it's like Dealer No Deal and Survivor as like one show.
Mouth agape. What? I'm writing this down.
Yeah, it's called,
Looking
and
up.
one of my coworkers was talking about it, and like basically like they like find these Dealer No Deal cases on the island, and they can like choose to like trade it in for immunity or like keep the case or whatever. He's like, but you could be fully walking around all season with this like case that has like 4 cents in it. So it seems like so insane.
I'm obsessed with this and I have to watch. But they broke up July 19th, which was like only a few days after Venus stationed retrograde or Venus
Before that,
entered. Or she
no, the
taken.
station was like the 23rd. Yeah, station
Oh,
was July 22nd.
okay. Oh, right.
Station
Duh, I know
direct
that.
was
Yeah.
September 3rd.
Okay. So, yeah, they broke up as well. And then it was Britney
Brittany.
Spears and Sam broke up after the retrograde. Just like, or no, sorry, fully during. Why am I'm so out of it.
Dates are hard.
They broke up August 15th. So in the middle of that retrograde, I mean, so many people
And
broke
like,
up.
and when you think about Venus in Leo, like it's a visible fucking Venus. Like
Yeah, right.
it is Venus
The breakups
in
were super fucking visible.
were people that had like, even if these people did not have Leo in their chart, like they very much are solar. Like they are in the
Yeah.
eyes of the public. Everyone knows who they are.
Relationships of solar people, of visible people.
And them all just
Yeah.
dissolving.
Yeah. I mean, there were even like minor influencers on TikTok broke up with their partners. And I'm like, it was just so wild. Like everybody either broke up or they were like figuring out their relationship and starting to get serious about it.
Mhm.
And it was just such a a loud moment. And we had as well. Uh, we had the Barbie movie, and Barbenheimer and that huge media. Like, I mean, that press tour was relentless. Like, it was so well planned and so perfect and so loud, and that movie made a fuck ton of money, right? As a result of it. Like, I mean, it was huge. I mean, obviously, like, again, talking about astrology being used to provide success, like that therein lies the reason you engage with astrology, because like an electional astrology specifically, like that was a hugely successful press tour, and largely because they decided to pay attention to that.
Mhm.
As well as doing the good marketing, which, both are required at the same time.
Mhm.
But having this, moment of like, basically there was, remember all those stories of like women going to the Barbie movie and then like breaking up with their boyfriend a day later. Like, they were like, I'm done with this stuff. And I think it's what's so fascinating is that like the Barbie movie, I didn't watch it during the moment. Like, I didn't
Okay.
watch it during the retrograde when like it felt emotional for everyone. I watched
Mhm.
it when Venus was in Scorpio, when like all the Venus stuff was done, right? Like, fully Venus was in a place where she does not like. And so I watched it then. And I had a completely different experience. Like, my experience of it was very, I like watched it going, this is really cute. I really like this. It's obviously very well done. It is so obviously an ad for Barbie, for Mattel. Like,
Oh my
it
God.
is
Absolutely. Yes.
loudly an ad for Mattel, right? And yes, there is feminism. There is like film references all over the place. It's beautifully, beautifully, beautifully made because they had so much money. And,
What was I
Greta
didn't
is so talented, of course. And so is Margot. So I mean, they had the big actors, they had everyone. It was beautiful and perfect. But it is an ad. And so I don't know. I like the magic wasn't as, because I wasn't in the middle of the press tour
Okay,
watching
so the
magic.
budget was between 128 and 145 million dollars.
Yeah,
And
huge amounts of
the
money.
box
Every movie
office revenue
was like a
was
billion, no?
a billion and a half, 1.44 billion. Like insane.
So much money. So much money. And also Mattel, Barbie made fuck tons of money. Like, the sales of
Yeah, the
Barbie
sales of Barbie,
increased.
yes.
So like they succeeded not only in making a successful movie, like one of the most successful movies ever, in fact,
Hmm.
but also successful in marketing the product that they were
Hmm.
selling,
And if you
right?
think about it, like it's for some people that are like our age and younger,
Yes.
there was
Yes.
like Barbie was the biggest thing in like the
Yes.
70s and 80s. Like it was
Yes.
Barbie. She was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
doll. But
Yeah.
for us growing up, there was like Polly Pocket, there was Bratz, there
Yes.
were like all of these
Yes.
other dolls that had at least
True.
reached the market at some point, that Barbie wasn't like the only
Girl.
doll.
Yeah.
But so in a way, for some younger people, it was almost like an introduction to like how
Barbie.
big Barbie really
Yes.
was.
Yeah. Which is the whole point, right? Because Barbie was like, as a brand, was losing its
Was
power
declining.
with young people, specifically, who were the ones who were supposed to be buying it, right? Like, that's the whole point. Like,
Right.
they only had the audience of like older people who were introducing it to their, or like there wasn't this like energy in the brand anymore, and so they had to
Mm-hmm.
reinvigorate it, and so they spent 140 something million.
Million.
To do that, and it was wildly successful. They
Mm-hmm.
brought Barbie back to a new generation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
In
And
this lens of feminism, because
yes,
historically Barbie was like it was the male gaze. Like you were like the doll was made by man.
well,
Like
that's the other thing, right? Like, yes, okay, yes, Barbie never got married. Barbie didn't have a baby. Barbie,
she has all
what did
these
she do?
jobs. She
She
like
has all
da da
these jobs.
da.
She was the president. She was an astronaut. She was a teacher. She had all these jobs. But I think, I can't remember who this was, but it's like, it is so interesting how like white feminism in particular is like obviously so surrounded by the idea of being able to work.
Mm,
Whereas like women of color, like, I've always
yeah.
worked,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, you
And they've
know,
always worked, mama.
they've always worked, mama. But like, the liberation of Black women doesn't include massive amounts of labor, right? Like, you know,
It is in fact the opposite.
it's actually the opposite, right? And so it's like also Barbie, as it has been a feminist icon for white women.
Sure.
Yes, there have been there's a whole new documentary with Shonda Rhimes that is supposed to be really, really incredible, that's talking about the introduction of Black Barbie and talking about yeah, like the like I mean the extreme importance of Black Barbie being introduced.
Mhm.
And also, right, like it is also true that like the idea of women working as being like the feminist lens through which Barbie was created and then
Right.
established is white feminism specifically, because
Absolutely.
I do not dream of labor, thank you very much, but
No.
Barbie does. And so I think it's just interesting, but all these critiques aside, right? This is a moment, and I think this is like really, really always important to remind ourselves as like queer people who like or like are kind of like steeped in intersectional feminism these days. Like this was though a moment of like experience. Everybody was like kind of like critiquing it like this is basic feminism, right? Like while not fewer people mentioned that it was like an ad for Barbie, which it
Fully
should have
was.
been more of the conversation, but they were saying, well, this is like such basic feminist discussions.
Mhm.
And it's like if you start to sit in that, you start to realize, but how few people have access to the basic tenets of feminism, the basic ideas of even just the idea, like it struck such an emotional chord with women and femmes around the world.
Mhm.
The idea of even just like um America Ferrera's speech at the end, where she's like, "You have to be this, and you have to be that, you have to be that." It's like impossible to be a woman, and like, yes, like like that speech spoke so deeply to so many people, and like, I
Mhm.
don't know, I've been thinking about the idea of like within this kind of discussion and this like reflection of this Venus retrograde is that. While we're steeped in, queer people seem to be steeped in a lot of feminism. There's so many people who don't have access to it, and that's
Right.
like interesting and kind of sad that the only way people got access to it was to make multiple massive corporations tons of fucking money.
Right.
But I know capitalism.
I do think, I mean, and this is like a somewhat of a personal anecdote because this is a
Yeah.
conversation I had with my brother after. So like his
Mhm.
girlfriend was like, let's go watch Barbie. And he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, let's fine, we'll go.
Yeah.
And we talked about it afterwards, and he was like, I was like, oh, I was like, oh, you went to see it. How was it? He was like, I didn't really get it. And I was like, what didn't
Yeah.
you
What's
get?
there to, I honestly, what's the, yeah.
And he was like, well, I didn't know what the patriarchy was. So I had to Google it when the movie was over. And like,
Sorry.
and like we're talking about like
But
a very cis white boy like who went through the public school system, like
yes.
should have been probably exposed to what that was at some point,
Yeah.
but like sadly was not.
Hmm.
And so this was for some, specifically men who like went with their girlfriends.
Yes.
Like this was a very basic level, like this is why feminism is a thing and is like kind of important also for you,
Yeah.
not just for your
Yes.
girlfriend,
Yeah.
which is
I
sad.
mean, it is so sad. But like that's an example of exactly what we're talking about. Like the basic tenets of feminism. There's so many people who do not have access to that. And I think again, as like people who are steeped in it, we have to like remember that. And like while it's a good critique to say that, or while it's like a valid, I should say valid critique to say that like it could it have been more, it's like at the end of the day, no, because it was an ad for Barbie. Like let's let the thing be the thing. Right? Like it is, we still live within capitalism. This is the most they were capable of doing. And in doing that, they were able to make a bunch of money, which means hopefully, maybe they can go further next time, right? Because what is Margot Robbie doing next time?
Oh yeah, you said she's like the
Monopoly.
Monopoly movie.
I mean, hey, let's do a deconstruction of capitalism discussion. Like, I love that. Like, I mean,
Sure.
the only way to do that properly is to have a discussion about access to housing and affordable
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
housing and capitalism destroying the earth.
I mean, and that hopefully is the way that they're going to go with it. I literally,
I mean, right.
I didn't know this was a thing until we talked about it, like 3 or 4 days ago. I was like, you're joking. This is not
No, yeah.
real.
Well, because Monopoly is also another brand that has lost its staying power.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I think people are recognizing that Monopoly was not invented to be a fun game. Like, Monopoly was originally invented as a critique of capitalism. And like, people are like obsessed with it.
Obsessed
Like,
with it
they're like,
and
I
like
play it
love
to the
succeeding.
end. And I'm like, you're
I get
are you a
so
landlord?
bored.
Are you also a landlord? Like, what the fuck? It's not fun. It's not fun.
People who it's red flag if you enjoyed Monopoly.
Red
Red
flag.
flag if you have finished a game of Monopoly without going, fuck this, I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah.
Red flag if you're good at it. Honestly,
It's like
check in with yourself.
I'm good at it. I just don't like it. It's not fun. Like playing this fucking game for hours of like,
Yeah,
oh, give me a
horrible.
good game of Risk. I'll play that for hours.
Ooh,
Monopoly,
period.
absolutely not.
It just gets, I don't know, it gets boring. Yeah, you're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
it's not. It's just like, I mean, the reflection of how people live their actual lives. Like when you get down
Yeah,
to the end and you have like no money,
yeah,
it's not fun watching these people just buy a bunch of things for their property
yes, yes. And get richer and richer and richer and richer as
as you're
you,
sitting there for 45 minutes with no
and you're like
dollars.
hoping that you won't have to like give them all your money.
Yeah, it's insane.
If you enjoy Monopoly, you're the problem.
Mm.
And you
I
have to
did.
reflect on
I
that.
do fuck with life though. Life is fun.
I do fuck with life. That's a silly baby girl game, but I
Yeah,
do
life
fuck with
is for the
life.
girls.
Yeah.
Monopoly is for the men. But yeah, I will fuck up a good
Period.
game of life. Absolutely.
I do like life. LOL. Absolutely. Um, I know. So I guess in reflecting about this, right? And I like we invite everyone to kind of like reflect what was going on during that period of time for them and
Mhm.
just like what they were thinking about given all of these things that are happening just like around us too. And like also, like with I think it was like, to go back to the strikes because I just want to like talk about that for a tiny bit more.
Mhm.
It's like those were such visible and important strikes. That was also if we're talking about the introduction of people's of certain ideals to a mass group of people it's labor unions, like the discussion of labor unions and the discussion of labor and what like we deserve to be paid to do the work that we do.
Mhm.
And like I mean, there was a lot of contentious conversations about why are actors there like so like they make so much money, why do they need more? And people realizing or like people like fighting like back with those people saying this is not about the rich actors. This is about the everyday actor. And that's what unions are about, right? Like the like making sure. I mean,
Like
and specifically,
Margot Robbie is fine. She will be fine. It's not
it's
about her.
it's not
Like
about her.
it's
And
about
and she did know that, right? Like they all knew that. They like knew that what this was about. And like the discussions, that many people would have, that like when the folks who were media trained, and were on camera, they were like, this is about legacy. It's not about me. It's not about like the individual moment. Like I need to make personally more money. Yes, that may be something that I think I deserve, but it's about people coming up. It's about the legacy
Mhm.
of this. And I think so much of like retrogrades and returns are about reflection. Like, am I where I wanted to be? Am
Mhm.
I, are we doing the right things? Are we getting it done properly?
Mhm.
And as we're coming to the return of this retrograde, where we reckoned with those things, we should reflect on what came up and like be able to perhaps come at it with a clearer mind
Mhm.
and not as much emotion so that we can find where we can also because I mean like the end of relationships is deeply emotional. The end of certain projects or certain things like is deeply emotional and finding and reconciling with those difficulties is like a really difficult thing to go through. Now that you have a year or so of separation, maybe now is the moment to come back and reflect.
Mhm.
And so in that, I wanted us to reflect. Um, yeah, what happened for you in this retrograde, in the Venus retrograde last year?
So yeah, I have been trying to think about this like literally for the past few days about like what was going on for me with the Venus
Yeah,
retrograde.
we should also mention maybe the
And
dates of the retrograde. I'm just
I did
remembering.
it earlier, but I will do it again for sure.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So from the whole thing, Venus entered
Yeah.
its shadow at 28 Leo on June 19, or
Mm,
sorry, at 12 Leo. It entered shadow on June 19. July 22nd, so about a month
yeah.
later, stationed retro at 28 Leo, was
Yeah.
retro for the classic 40-ish days until September 3rd, stationed direct at 12 Leo, was still in shadow and didn't leave its shadow until like for another month, the beginning of October at 28 Leo. So if we're counting the whole shadow period alongside with the retrograde, it was the middle of June to the beginning of October. So like it was all of summer and a hefty amount of fall.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So for me specifically, the biggest thing that I can think of is and I don't know how this relates really to my chart at all, because Leo's our third house.
Yeah. Right.
I'm in my Leo perfection now. So I was in my Cancer perfection before that. So all of this retrograde was like averse to my perfected house. It was second for my perfected house, which is what I'm thinking about. I was making, well, and now also still making, but began that period making the most money I've ever made in my life in a job, because I had gotten promoted in February of last year, and then started working. It's not really another promotion. It was like a lateral move, but it included more hours, same pay, more hours of getting paid. And I make overtime every week now as well. So like, I was just remember being like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Like, I'm making like adult money now. As like, I'm 26 now. So I was 25. Oh my God, math. But like as a 25-year-old being like, what do I do with this? Like, how do I can like, just like leisurely, like go do things now. Crazy. So that was that on like the Venus material level.
Sure.
On the Venus emotional level of like love and romance. That was when Daniel and I really started talking about like what we were going to do, because we had been long distance for a year, just over a year at that point. We physically separated July of 2022. So the retrograde was like a year-ish after that. And I finally got to this point where I was like, listen, I love you endlessly. And if we cannot come to a place where we are like physically together, like, I just cannot do this. Like, and it wasn't like we were like, two of my coworkers just started dating, and one of them transferred to a different store, like an hour and a half away. And he was like, oh, it's a 90-minute drive. And I literally was like, shut the fuck up. I had to get on a 3-hour plane ride. Okay. I don't want to hear it.
Long distance.
Anyway. Distance. You're in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I'm so sorry.
LOL.
So yeah, it was this idea, this like reflection, this renegotiation really of like what this relationship was going to look like. Ultimately, obviously worked out. He's here now. We live together again. It's fine. But
I mean, it's beautiful.
It really was like, I reached this point where I was like, this is unsustainable for me. Like, I don't know what to do. So, but now he's here, because why wouldn't you move 1,200 miles for me?
Period. And now I mean, like, that's such a big, like, I mean, it's such a, I didn't want to say stereotypical, but like, it's such a obvious Venus retrograde thing. And also, I believe Daniel's Venus is in Leo, no?
So Venus stationed direct on his Venus, like to the degree, 12 Leo.
I mean, loud. That like the relationship needed to come to a head. Like you needed to make a decision. He
also was experiencing the start of his Saturn return, and he has Saturn in the 7th. So a lot.
It was getting serious.
Yeah. It was so funny because after his exact Saturn return hit was in March of this year. And he had been up here for like a little over a month at that point. And he was like, what is my Saturn return? And I was like, it's me.
Literally.
It's literally me. You moved in with Saturn. It's fine. It's me.
I mean,
it happened.
Saturn at Makaraka, no?
Saturn at Makaraka. I didn't even plan this. I'm literally wearing black. This is the one black piece of
literally
clothing
wearing black.
I
That's
own.
So funny.
This is the one black piece of clothing I own, and I'm wearing it today. So, welcome. You moved in with Saturn. Congrats. That's it.
Yeah,
you're done.
That is your Saturn return. You've
done it. You did it. Congrats.
I mean, many other things are going to happen, but at the same time, this is literally it.
This is it. Yeah.
I mean, so spot on. For me, it was a little less obvious, and I think largely because I think there was just so much going on in my life at that time. I had just been like moving around so much, and I had just moved to Seattle. after staying with you for a little bit. And we went to basically Norwalk, and then I was like, I'm not leaving.
And then I left you at
Uh,
Norwalk.
yeah, right. And then you left me. And it was just this journey of like, so for me, the IC is in Leo, and the Kizimi was on the Venus Kizimi during the retrograde, the retrograde was um inferior conjunction is the word I was looking, the term I was looking for, was on my IC, like
Mhm.
exactly. Um, and it was like for me a reckoning of like the foundational things. Like I need to figure out what's happening. Like I had gone through, and I guess still I'm going through a very difficult. It was larger, I guess then a very difficult period of like reckoning with my life, and it was very much Saturn return related, and Saturn hitting absolutely everything. And while returning in my chart and in Aquarius through Aquarius, and so that had ended. Saturn moved into Pisces and into my 10th. So moving from a return to moving into an angular Saturn transit is just like so much. And so there was like a lot of decisions to be made. What do I do? Like I think the reckoning came especially on the Kazemi where it was just like I need to do something. Like I had like no energy anymore. I was just like feeling not so great about myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm like living here and this is great and I like this. Like, I was inspired by you working where we work.
Which is
And
which
I
is
was,
tangentially a Venus place because we work with food and we engage in
oh,
customer
sure.
service.
I
Like
mean, absolutely.
it is a Venus Mercury place, but like it
Yeah.
is
I
very
mean, I would
Venus.
also say a lunar place, but yes, I would agree.
Yes.
I would agree. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, like I literally went in and like asked for an application, did the application that day. Then honestly, the when I did it was the first ingress of the moon into Taurus
Mm.
after Rahu had left. That was like my
Mm.
election of
Oh
sorts.
my God, the nodes also changed signs.
They did. They did. That was a wild time. And so, yeah, and then I got the job within like 3 days, right? And like, it was this like first moment after a really long reckoning and a really difficult period of time of like having financial freedom again and
Mhm.
feeling like a lot more stable. And over the course of the past year, like this has been like a moment of like coming back to myself and like receiving and experiencing stability. So I mean, again, it was like it was Venus retrograde at the base of my chart, right?
Mm.
At the IC, really deciding that like I need to get the foundation right. And that's been this entire since then, the
Mm.
entire year has been about getting stable,
Mm.
getting the foundation of the things that I need settled. Um, and still, like I don't have like I'm like moving from place to place, but like I have a place that I'm likely going to move into for a year on August 1st. So like it's ending, like this period of that difficulty is ending. But like that's what initiated the like I need to set up my new foundation based on my new
Mm.
needs after such a difficult set of circumstances that happened.
And
Um, yeah.
August 1st, Venus will be a degree away from the station degree.
That's right. She will be at like 28,
She's
no?
27 and she's stationed at
27?
28.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're
So like,
really ridiculous. I mean, and I think this is what is so interesting about reflecting on previous transits. And looking at like especially when they return back to that place that
mm,
they had a really big impact, is like noticing, in retrospect, all that shifted as a result of
mm,
what those planets did in
mhm,
that space and how they moved through there. Um, there's something really beautiful about looking at those returns because it
mhm,
really does show up so much in so many different ways. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. Of
Another thing that makes me I connect back to this Venus retrograde period is Drag Race because there's always a season of Drag Race on.
course.
So
Yeah.
Zach has described my knowledge of Drag Race as encyclopedic, which I felt so
It's a
honored to receive
compliment.
that moniker.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
right.
great. I have basically seen every season other than Drag Race Sweden. I did not watch Drag Race Sweden, but every other franchise of Drag Race I have consumed. Um, when I think about what was going on during the retrograde,
Hmm.
last summer it was like Venus was in shadow but hadn't stationed yet. Was
Hmm.
All Stars 8 was happening. And presumably All-Star, usually they film like a year-ish before it releases. I went back and looked in All-Stars 9. It's so funny because if you look on Reddit, these people like track when the queens like go off Instagram to like try to figure out when they're on the season. Like it is a full-time job, these Reddit people. And like I don't know how they do it. They're like, some of them are like, I last saw her on Grindr 8 days ago and she's usually active every day, so she has to be filming. And you're like, girl, get a job, get a life, get a hobby. Useful for me now.
It's the same as what if had people. They are like fanfic.
Oh my God.
and Drag Race. I mean, it's literally the same.
It's the same. Yeah.
Fans. That Venn diagram is a circle.
That Venn diagram. But so All Stars 8, I looked. The finale aired the day before Venus stationed, I believe. If I look again, finale aired the day before Venus stationed Retro. Yes, so it was happening, kind of like leading up to it, and I just remember the season literally from the first episode. So the season aired May 12th, and the finale was July 21. Venus stationed July 22. I remember the second they all walked into the season, I was like, they're setting it up for this one queen to win. She did. She ended up winning.
That's really wild.
But like because I've watched so many seasons, like I feel like I'm like I am the producer now. I'm like I know exactly what you're setting up. Yeah. Like
I know
you're getting the villain
narrative.
Like you see the narratives. Like they push them. And this one girl they were just pushing the fuck out of. Her name is Jimbo. She's great. She's not my fave, but she won and whatever. It was a first for a lot of the things that they did. So it was the first time that they usually when they get to the end, there's traditionally there's 3 or 4 queens that make it to the end, and then they have some version of a live-ish finale. Yeah. Where what they do is they record everyone winning and they air the one that they want. So the girls don't find out until it airs. I mean, they know that they made it to the end and there's a chance that they won, but they don't know who wins until we all know, which is kind of cool. But it was the first time that they had a top 2. They only had 2 girls make it to the finale, I was like, that's kind of strange. Like, why are they doing that? They also did
as opposed to a top 3.
Usually they usually do 3 or 4. Okay, and if it's 4, they'll usually have like only 2 of them actually make it to the end, but like all 4 make it to the last episode. Got it. But it's the first time they had a top 2 in the finale, which was like kind of strange. And then they also did this thing called the Fame Games, where usually every season they do a talent show episode, which I always hate because I'm like, their talent is they do drag. That's the talent. Like you don't have to do anything else. And half of them end up either just like lip syncing anyway as their talent because that's their talent.
Because that's
your makeup artistry and your ability to design your outfit. That's a talent in my book. However, whatever. I always fucking hate the talent show. For my drag, if you're a Drag Race fan, I want to know about your thoughts about the talent show because I fucking hate the talent show.
But your comments in the book below.
Comment below.
Oh my gosh! You know what? I'm gonna let you speak. Keep going.
But what they did was they did the talent show they brought all the girls back to do the talent show. On the last episode, and they then like 2 of the girls who had the best talent show that had already been eliminated. Like lip sync and like could win the Queen of the Fame Games, which was like a $50,000 prize for anyone that had been eliminated, which was like awesome. I was like, oh great, I'm glad you're bringing all these girls back. They get to showcase their talent. And the girl who I wanted to win the season ended up winning the Fame Games, which I was like, good for you, Miss Thing. But like wanted you to win the whole thing. So that was what was airing, and then they were actively filming, I believe, All Stars 9 during the retrograde. Like I think they wrapped airing All Stars 8 and then almost immediately started filming All Stars 9, which has it's airing actively right now. We're about probably 2/3 of the way through the season now. It's a charity season, so none of the girls are winning money. All of the money that they win goes to a charity that they chose, which like is awesome. Love that they're doing that. And it's just like it's weird. Like why? And some of the charity choices
are they all the like big deal girlies? Is that
so? It's All Stars, so it's all girls that are coming back for at least their second time.
Oh, okay.
And it's also a non-elimination season, so there's 8. There's 8 of them, and they've just been
like win
through the whole season together. Yeah, they win beautiful benefactress badges.
Oh, okay.
And the 3 girls who have the most badges at the end make it to the finale, where they could win up to $200,000 for their charity.
Got it.
Which is awesome. Like, glad they're doing that. Some of the charity choices, like one of the girls is like the ASPCA. I'm like,
okay, Sarah McLachlan.
Yeah. One of the girls is like the National Black Justice Collective. And I'm like, yes, like this is the charity that I want to get the money. Maybe not the ISPs. Whatever.
Yeah, right. Right.
But it's like, so, and it's a non-elimination season, which they've only ever done that once before, and that was when they had all the winners come back. So they had a bunch of winners come back. It was the same format, 8 of them. They don't get eliminated. They just make it to the end, but they won money.
Okay. Yeah.
But this season, they don't win money. Allegedly, they all got like
some kind of
a hefty stipend or beforehand, like close to 75 grand each.
Oh, good.
Beforehand, which like good for them. But also, I'm like, why a charity season now? Like, I don't know. I just have lots of questions, and like connecting back to like Venus and retrograde. Oh my god, I said Venus in retrograde. Please shoot me. Venus retrograde, and the idea of like reevaluating what we do with like the funds on this show. Like I could see that if it was actively being filmed, which it looked like it started filming around the beginning of August of last year ish.
Yeah.
So that is kind of cool to think about. But Drag Race is such a Venus show at the end of the day.
I mean, absolutely. Like you've looked at the chart of Drag Race, right? Like it doesn't have Exalted Venus?
It has, so the chart is Libra rising ruled by Exalted Venus. Exalted Venus at 29 Pisces. So it's like almost at the exaltation degree.
Wow. They waited like a breath longer.
It's at 29:58 Pisces. So like actively, like if they had waited minutes,
a breath.
If it had aired at 10:30 as opposed to 10 o'clock, yes, it would have been Venus and Aries. Yeah. So, and it's also Venus. She's entering shadow. Like she had entered shadow 30 arc minutes before she was. So the shadow period started at like 29:20 Pisces or something. This is back in 2009. So it was before a Venus retrograde in Aries.
Got it.
From Aries that stationed direct at 29 Pisces.
Got it.
So yeah, exalted Venus, exalted Mars, exalted Moon. So the Moon is in a Venus sign. Like the show is so Venus-y.
And so successful. I mean, like, the amount of fucking money that the show makes. I mean, there's so many versions of it. It's an empire. It's
the Runiverse. Yes, it is the Runiverse.
I mean, like it's also. I mean, that show. I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but like that shows the exalted Mars portion of it. Like it became an empire.
Exalted Mars in the 4th. Like you're leaving a legacy.
Oh shit. Right. Wow. That's. That'll do it.
And then when I think about obviously the Vedic chart would be different, but if you take Vedic concepts and apply them to the Western chart, Venus is MKS, Marnika, Kastana, house where it feels like it's dying, in the 6th. However, the only thing that negates MKS is what? Exaltation.
Which she would be in the Vedic chart anyway. Yeah. She
would be in the Vedic, but she would be in the 7th. Because the ascendant moves to Virgo. Okay. But yeah, so when you think about I always liken this Vedic concept to being like the opposite of house joy. So if we think of house joy as a house where the planet like thrives, the MKS is a house where the planet dies. And Venus is the 6th, and the only time that it can be negated is in a Libra rising when Venus is in Pisces in the 6th. So thinking about that relationship of Venus being like, this should be a place where she is uncomfortable, and like thinking about Drag Race, like for its time, like people were like, what the fuck is this? Like these F words on my television dressing like women, like what is this? To end up being like the success that it is now, the literal empire.
From Logo, which is like at that time a relatively obscure channel.
It was
like
so
it was
niche.
not. It was not like people did not watch that channel all that much, or people didn't know about it. Like especially mainstream is what I mean to say. It was like hard to access to a certain degree. That channel, and then it moving to was it VH1?
It moved to VH1 and then to MTV. I mean, and now some of the like All Stars is now exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Oh right, yeah.
Starting, I think it was All Stars 6 was the first season to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was 6. And the one right now is All Stars 9. So there's usually an All Stars every single year. So it's been 4. There's been 4 now seasons of All Stars that have been exclusively airing on streaming.
And not on television?
They might air on television after they all go up on streaming.
I'm sure obviously in other countries it must air on other places, but
it airs on so the production company for Drag Race is WoW Presents. And if you have the WoW Presents subscription service and you live outside of America, Canada, and Australia, I believe are the only ones that you can't watch it. But every other country, if you have WoW Presents, you can watch any season of Drag Race on that streaming service.
Got it.
But you can't here. You have to watch it on like
I think Paramount. From when I lived in France, I believe Drag Race was on Netflix.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know,
When my family was in Italy, I was watching Drag Race at night on
which
the
is like the wildest thing. I was like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
wild, wild.
Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, like such a Venus-y show, doing this kind of
sure.
like rebrand, not
I
rebranding.
mean, changing the way they did the structure. I mean, which is actually part of what they do all the time is kind of change the structure. But like,
Mhm,
truly, for the first time, it's a charity one, and it isn't, them getting a prize. That is
exactly.
like a very, retrograde. Let's try something new. Let's go
Let's
move
try
in a
something
different
new.
direction.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Especially the
that's
Venus
wild.
being so loud in their like
In their
Inception
chart.
first airing chart,
I
which
mean, the ascendant ruler, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Which I mean, if you want to look at it, it is on Astro Databank. It's that's
I
how I
mean,
found it.
bring
It's
it up.
Feb 2nd. Actually, I'll just air it. Nope, not that one. It's that one. So it's Feb 2nd, 2009 at 10 p.m. You get 11 Libra rising, Venus at 29.
Sirius is conjoined the midheaven. Of course, this show is
Is it
wild.
really?
That's so wild.
Yeah. It's also, it happened directly in between eclipses. So the moon is like basically exactly square the sun after a solar
Uh-huh.
eclipse, and the next full moon is a lunar eclipse in Aries in the 11th.
Wild. Also, the ascendant is on Algorab, which shows how cunning they are in the way that they do. Like, I mean, it's so orchestrated, is what I mean to say.
It's so produced. Oh my
Um,
God, it's so produced.
and I don't
Yes.
mean that in like a bad way. I mean that they so heavily produce like it is like a machine
Yes.
level like I don't know. It Algorab is also a bit nefarious, which is not like a part of
I
the
mean,
brand.
like some of the
Um,
storylines that they give
yeah,
some of these, like I literally, there was a tweet going around today that was like, name a time that like the judges convinced you that a performance on Drag Race was bad when it really wasn't. And like
yeah,
there are several instances where like us common folk are like, she should have won the challenge,
yeah.
and the girl goes home that week because they like
Mhm.
need to push this storyline or whatever.
Yes, yep.
Like it
They have a
is,
particular agenda. Yeah.
yeah, it is so nefarious. Like that's such a good word for it.
Mm.
What
Yeah, there you
constellation
go.
is Algorab in? I thought Algorab was the claws of the scorpion. I know that that's wrong now because of where
Maybe,
it is in the zodiac.
but oh well, I guess yeah. Is that 13 Libra? Is that Libra rising? Yeah, Libra rising.
Yeah.
So I think 13 Libra is where it is. So that's why I was like
Oh,
within three
it's
degrees.
in Corvus. Sure. Okay.
Corvus, right, because it's the yeah.
Is it the
I just like
claws?
picture. I don't know.
Delta Corvi. No, it's like it's on the wings. Never mind.
Mm.
I thought it was
Yeah,
claws for some
I
reason.
mean, the imagery would make sense to be honest, but I think it's
Traditional name Algorab comes from the Arabic word for the crow. Of course.
yep, sure does. Um, yeah, we have to ask Madge how to actually pronounce
I was
it.
like, now I know I'm saying it wrong, but
Now I actively know I'm saying all of this wrong. But yeah, that's interesting that those fixed stars are so prominent. Like on the ascendant and midheaven, they're like loud.
Mhm.
And exactly they reflect the yeah,
They reflect the nature of the show.
hmm Wow. Yeah, I mean, so to add into like what my Venus retrograde kind of thing that came up through the gods was like I was so attracted to this documentary, America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders. It was about their show. It was about the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. And it's a docu-series made by the people who made Cheer, which is Netflix like wildly successful docuseries on this cheerleading team in Texas. And then they also apparently did Last Chance U, which is a football, I think university football
Sure.
docuseries, which I have not watched, but I've heard is actually very, very good. And so they made this one. And, I it was just fascinating to me that this would come up. And I was like, why not watch it? I mean, like, I loved Cheer. I love like this seems like I know they can make something good, even if I'm not like super interested in the topic.
Mhm.
Which in this case I kind of was, right? And I felt also drawn to it. Like there felt like there was a purpose to me watching this. Like I felt like
Nudge,
there's
nudge. Watch this.
yeah, exactly. And so it starts off, right, like kind of talking about, and so one the thing, like there was just like constant, like nonstop moments of me being like, this is just like an ad for the Dallas Cowboys, isn't it? Like there was just like continuously throughout, I was like, okay, this is just it. Like but I was trying so hard to just be like a social scientist and not judge it. Like I was just trying to let it be what it
Let's be
was.
objective.
Yes, I was trying to remove my like thoughts from the
Mhm.
experience and allow the thoughts to come after, right? Um, So essentially, yeah, I mean, basically how they start by talking like the legacy of the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders and the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. And I mean, in the like last half of the or like like the end of the 20th century, like the Dallas Cowboys and the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders are like the most famous team in America, right? And therefore these cheerleaders are the most famous cheerleaders in the world. And the way this happened, right, was essentially in 1972 they changed from having cheerleaders that were like co-ed, so like men and women, and like it was not only co-ed, but it was also like usually high school girls cheering for the team. And
Yuck.
then they were, I know, I don't, please, I don't know. They changed it to being 18 and up after that in
Good.
1972. And then they gave them, as a result, like very sultry uniforms, right? So
Oh, they
they were
weren't wearing
giving
sultry uniforms
they
prior.
weren't wearing, no. They were giving like
Okay,
old
okay,
school
okay. I'm
1950s
okay, great.
cheerleader
I was like,
Johnny
we
Bra.
were putting 16-year-olds in that
No,
outfit,
no, no,
but
no, 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 no,
okay,
no. They
great.
were not.
Great.
It was very old school. And then in 1972, they changed that, right? They said,
Sure.
okay, 18 and up, and now we're their sex symbols. And the big moment, so that was the general manager like changed that. And then the big moment that there's that like the scholar, there's like a scholar who talks about the cheerleaders and like this have being like one big moment on television for Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and cheerleaders in general. It was November 10th, 1975, a game of Dallas Cowboys versus Kansas City, and the cameras go pan over from the game to the cheerleaders, and the cheerleader Gwenda Swearingen, I don't know exactly how to say her name, looks at the camera, pom poms in the air, shaking them, and she winks into the camera, and it propels the cheerleaders into the stratosphere.
It's like, and like
That's
every man watching football just like, ugh, not
immediately was like, oh my gosh, cheerleaders, right? Like they just had, it wasn't like it made them into like bombshells. It
sure.
made them into these incredible sex symbols. And like even the commentators at the moment, they like show the video footage and like the commentator is like, oh, I think she's winking at you, right? Like they became the symbol. And I shit you not, I had to look at the chart because I have to look at the chart of
I was like, I'm looking at
everything.
the chart right now.
Venus had just entered Libra, had just
Mm.
entered Libra. And I was like, of course. And like opposite Jupiter and Aries, it was just like
And Square Mars
very,
in Cancer, like
yeah,
they're yeah,
it
crazy.
was super, super wild. And so then in that decade in the 70s, Dallas Cowboys win two Super Bowls, and they become basically America's team, and the cheerleaders become America's sweethearts. They're like, this becomes a massive, massive brand. The women are on Love Boat. They are on, they're in Esquire. They're like doing magazine shoots. They are becoming a massive, massive, massive brand. Um, and so that's they set up the legacy. They have this like big image, and then I'm like, yeah, and so I'm like, this is wild. So the show is essentially about the 2023-2024 season, and like again, we have no dates as of this moment while I'm watching it. I don't know where it is. I just know 2023-2024 season,
Mhm.
and then they're like basically it's like from the tryouts to the end of the season is the show. And so they start the tryouts and they're telling these women, like they obviously talk to the women, they're talking about like, oh my God, I'm so excited, blah, blah, blah. And they're telling the women, so by July 19th, you should know if you're on the team. And then I'm like, wait a second.
Wait a
And I
second.
look back, July
You're like
19th,
Venus stations 3 days
3
later.
days,
Yeah.
Venus stations retrograde. And I was like, so, and like, honestly, the initial auditions and then the training camp, which is also where they eliminate people before the actual season begins, all of that, the actual crux of the series is the Venus retrograde. Like that's the narrative actually that they're creating or that they're like looking
Mm-hmm.
at. Certainly the season, the football season is part of it, but like, people love a competition, right? Like that's what they want. And that's what they focused on. And then I'm like, we're starting to go through this and they're talking about to the women and they're doing it. And I start to find out they're like, this is a part-time job. And I'm thinking in my head, a billionaire owns this team. And these women are only being paid part-time. So
Yeah,
they
they
actually
make
have
they make
jobs.
like $12,000 a year or something like ridiculously low, right?
Well, yeah, but one of the women, I think it might be a little bit more than that, but that doesn't mean anything.
But like barely.
One of the barely, truly, one of the women who had basically she had retired the year before in 2022. she and was 25. So like we'll get to that. She retired in 2022, and she was like, we basically make the amount of a Chick-fil-A worker
They make
full time.
$22,000 a year.
That's zero. So that's not a full-time job that you cannot pay, even in Texas, where you have like a full excuse me, where they have like a very low cost of living for a
Yeah,
number of
still, that's
reasons,
insane.
that you cannot survive on that, right? That's not an actual salary. And I was just thinking, like, I was shocked by that.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden I started thinking, and I'm like, well, this is the South, and this is specifically Texas. Like, this is
Let's talk about how we value women.
Exactly. And also, and then I started to think about, okay, this institution was created and established and like became big at a time when we viewed like women certainly still as property, could not take out their own credit cards or have a bank account, right? And as a result, they don't have their own money, right? If you can't have a bank account, you can't like, so the only way these women, so I was thinking about like, so who are the women then who are even still today able to try out for this and are able to become this? It has to be women who are wealthy, have a job, or like,
or have someone that can pay for everything.
And have some exactly. And so I was thinking, I'm like, oh, that's what it is. Like it's the traditional concept of a woman either being married or having their father pay for things. So we're talking about wealthy white women. That's the only women who could like possibly do that. I mean, yes, there have been absolutely Black women on the cheerleading team. They are very few and far between. And I will say that the women who are on it now, there's 36 women who are on the team every year. And of the 36, I think I saw maximum 5 women of color, and they're almost entirely light skinned. There was like one, maybe I could have missed, maybe 2 dark-skinned Black women, but everyone, I mean, the vast majority of women are like white, and a number of them are blonde. And so there's this particular image, right? Like there's just like this, and I was just thinking, and I started to like delve into this, especially when I started to realize that it was the Venus retrograde period when this was filmed. We were filming during this Venus retrograde, which was again a reckoning with these ideas of women and these ideas of feminism, this idea of like what we're worth. And one of like who ended up becoming one of the main characters in the show was having her reckoning with the institution. Like she had been in the institution for 4 years. She like her mom was a Cowboys cheerleader. She always wanted to be a Cowboys cheerleader. This was like something that she needed, wanted, desired. And it was really important to her. And her mom actually cheered with the now director of the Cowboys cheerleaders.
Oh shit.
The head of this. And so like there's a lot of pressure, right? A lot of pressure to succeed and to do well. And like throughout this season, they're talking about this woman, wanting to be a leader, but them all being like, she's never going to be a leader. She doesn't even speak to the women. She does like, they think she's not nice. They like, but she's like, it's clear she's like reckoning with how she's being perceived and like all of this stuff. Like, and you know, like obviously but I'm not going to do a trigger warning for what I'm going to say. I'm just trigger warning for people who are going to watch this show. There are discussions of critiques of women's bodies. There are discussions where they're like being very critical about these women's bodies. They're being, you know, they're talking about like intake and women not taking enough in to be able to like sustain themselves energetically. So like, just want you to know in case that's something that like you want to watch out for. But this woman, she was really struggling with this and really giving her all to this institution who seemed to not care about her anymore. And they were ready to let her go. And she didn't want to let it go because it was a part of her entire identity from when she was a young girl to now, right? And there's this one moment where it just like was so interesting. Like one of the quotes was like, either tell me I suck or tell me that I'm great. I need to hear one or the other. I just need to know that I'm being seen. And I was like, Venus and Leo, like literally, like she was just like, I need to know. Why aren't you telling me? And they get to the end of the season, right? And they either put it on the rack where it is, yes, I'm gonna try out again. And oh, so this is the other part. everyone tries out again. If you are a veteran or if you're a novice, you're all trying out together. The only difference is, right, the veterans, the like people who had been there for a while, they don't have to obviously go like submit a video, right? So they get past the first video, like they don't have to submit a video. They get into that particular round. So the first round is like,
But you're
like
still retrying out fully.
yes, fully, 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 fully. So the order of this, I should have said this at the beginning, but like order of it is like thousands and thousands of women submit videos of them dancing and their whole resume and who they are and blah, blah, blah. Then they pick from that thousands and they bring it down and they bring that, sorry, excuse me, they don't bring them because all of these tryouts, I want to just have this be understood. It brings in even more of the narrative of it, like who can actually try out for this. It is over a month long. They didn't say exactly how long it was, but there was a moment when the people who had gotten to the end, close to the end, were like they were staying in a resort, like a nice fucking fancy ass fucking place in Dallas, Texas. And they were like, we've been here for like, it's so crazy. We're going crazy. Like, we've been here for 29 days. Do you know how much money it costs to stay at a resort for a month or more? I was
That
like,
you're funding.
and that you have to fund. Yes. They like literally director like said they don't fund it. And there's like they're not funding food, they're not funding shelter, they're not funding anything. They're not paying them a stipend for doing the tryouts. No, it is all footed by each woman themselves. And it is a part-time job. So there's women, so they come in and they do the rehearsals, they do the trials, they do everything at night. So some of these women are like nurses. There's one woman who is an orthodontist. Like we're talking like big deal women or really young women who have parents who can pay for them or husbands or boyfriends who can pay for them coming in at night doing the tryouts for over a month, right? Wild. So
it's that part is especially crazy to me when you think about like how much money the football players make. Like,
yeah. Okay, this is the other thing. The institution itself, just the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, they bring in their own income. So their budget of where they're paid, the director, the choreographers, and the cheerleaders, all paid out of their own budget that they bring like sustainable resources to. And they still won't pay these cheerleaders a living wage. They literally have them make calendars, and like swimsuit calendars that they sign at events, and they have to go to extra events. They have to do community work. They have to do all of this extra stuff. And I'm telling 22,000, no money. They were paid no. The whole idea is experience. You were a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. That's all you really get. You don't get money for real money because it's not actual money that's helpful. Okay, so she comes down and she's like, she is putting her hanger up and saying, so yeah, right. So basically, veterans and they all do it together. So a lot of veterans actually didn't make it through. And so she's going up and they're saying, are you gonna like try out or not? And you put your like costume or whatever, you put your uniform like on one of the racks. And they were like, she's like, I want to have a conversation first. And she has the conversation and she's mentioning this, right? Like this idea of like, tell me I suck or I'm great. Like, I just need to know I'm being seen. And she's like trying to pull it out of them. She didn't say that quote to them. She said that in a confessional, basically saying like, this is what I want from them. And she's going to this room, talking to these women about like her legacy at this place. She wants to be a leader. Do you think I could be a leader? Like she's trying to draw out care from these women. And I mean, stone face. I have never seen such a cold interaction from Southern women. But maybe I have. Honestly, I might have because it's so clear that they don't care. And that's like, but they're being very polite, but they do not care. Like she even starts crying and it's clear they're not fully tears of emotion of the moment, though she's clearly by not getting the care, she is therefore emotional. She's pulling on that, but they're a bit like the tears are trying to bring out something in them for them to react to. And I don't think it's a bad thing. And they're not. They go, oh, do we have tissues somewhere? I was like,
clap if you care.
Literally clap if you care. It was astounding. And this woman was like, honestly having a reckoning in that moment. She had been having a reckoning the entire season.
Right.
And she was having a reckoning in this
She's having
moment.
her Freytag's pyramid. Like we see the arc.
Truly.
Yeah.
And she was like, because she wasn't getting the reaction, I think she wanted to seem strong because she had just broken down and it didn't get anything. And so she's
Mm.
like, well, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna like, I'm not gonna quit. I'm not gonna do it. And da da da.
So she is
And
fully on
then
the I'm trying
she
out
was fully,
again
yes, I'm trying out
rack.
again. Right. And so they have their last gathering at the end of the season. This is our little party. We did this woo woo. Like some people get awards, Miss Congeniality or something like that.
Most kind.
No, but truly. And so like MVP kind of thing, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so and then she says to the camera, she goes, I haven't told like the director or anything, but I've decided I'm not coming back. I can't do this anymore. Like I've done what I need to do, but I'm not coming back. I don't need this anymore. Um, and so she's like, like there's just nothing more I can give, and all that. And it was such a fascinating watch all the way through. Like I haven't said all the details that I wanted to say, but it's just like it
Mm.
was such
Wait, and you said this was like her fourth year on the team, was that
fourth
right?
year on the team. Yeah.
Well, and
And
then when you think about the cycle of Venus, like every 8 years she
half
does
of
the same thing, but half. So
yeah,
she would have started during the direct
Aquarius
Kazemi in Leo.
in Leo. Oh, right. Oh my
She would
God.
have
Right.
started when
Yeah.
Venus was
Da, da,
direct
da, da,
in
da, da.
Leo,
Yes.
probably
Yes.
near the
Yes.
Kazemi.
Sorry. Yeah.
So that was her like Venus in Leo experience, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I think that's what the other thing too was like I was having a realization that like because I had while watching the show I was like, oh, Barbie, like duh, they're Barbies, right? Like this is
They're
like
Barbies.
a particular ideal of a woman
Mm-hmm.
in America. It's like a particular American ideal of beauty. And they are like, and I think one of the like most upsetting things is that like previously in like previous generations, these women like literally they were talking, the director was talking about how the auditions for becoming a college Dallas Cowboys cheerleader was literally women coming in and like doing a little shimmy and doing their little shake and doing just like dancing to music and doing a little shake. That was it.
And that was it.
Now it is like you have to be one of the best and most skilled dancers, or else you're never gonna make it. They were like talking about your kick just wasn't high enough. You're out. Like, and they're like, well, I can improve over a week. And they're like, no, you can't. We literally don't think you can. And these women have never, they're both the director, the head choreographer are previous Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders when they never had to be good dancers. They just had to be cute. Like, and so like it feels like the millennial Gen Z frustration with boomers because these women are like in their 60s, right? You're like, or 50s, 60s. You're like, Mama, you didn't have to do any of this to be the same thing I am. I have to be one of the best dancers in the country to be a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader.
And you had to do a little shimmy, do a little
all you
shake.
had to do was do a little shimmy. And we're getting paid basically probably the same amount. Like, right? And they have to be wildly skilled. And like again, I want to mention, there's no unskilled labor, right? Like labor
Correct.
is a skillful
That is
act.
unskilled labor
right?
is a myth. Yes.
And also, to be a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader these days, you have to be so wildly skilled. One of the things, I'm sorry, I know I'm going on forever about this, but like one of the things that they have to do is they have to do, so one of the big dance is like to Thunderstruck, and they come out and they do this big routine and they do a big kick
worst
line.
fucking song.
Honestly, the routine is
I'm sure the
like
routine is fierce.
powerful.
The song,
Yeah.
terrible.
But so they're doing this routine. It is really, really great. They do a kick line, and it is like an intense kick line, and then they jump and do it into a split. And these
Simultaneous,
women,
like all together,
they are linked to each other, arm and on shoulder,
and do a jump split.
kick line, jump split, jump split down. Okay, these women are literally talking about not being able to last longer than 5 years because they physically cannot do the job, and they are in their early 20s. These women we're talking about who had recently retired, talking about getting hip surgery, like having pelvic problems.
At like our age.
At 23, 24, 25.
No.
Okay, breaking their ankles and like I'm serious, like having to have ankle surgery, having to have hip surgery, because of doing the jump split that these women, this director and head choreographer, have never had to do themselves. And so we're talking about deeply skilled women getting paid absolutely
I was like,
nothing.
that could be making significantly more money doing absolutely anything else.
Absolutely anything else. And they are being seen as part-time laborers, and that's why they can be paid so little. And yet they make the organization and the institution so much money. Like, I don't know what that director and that head choreographer make, but I'm sure they make a lot.
And I mean, the Dallas Cowboys are like America's team or whatever. So like,
Yes.
I'm sure they're probably worth the most of any football team in the country.
What? Absolutely. They have a huge fan base, right?
Yeah.
And again, we have to go back to the same kind of thing that like, Barbie is. This documentary was obviously a way to market the Dallas Cowboys because the NFL is making no money, right? Like there are so many documentaries on football, like on ESPN and all that. They wasn't an original idea or like to do a Dallas Cowboys thing, but it is a very original idea to do a Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders
Cheerleader
documentary.
doc. Yeah.
And so it's to make the brand a bunch of money. And it's interesting how you can see the cracks in the veneer throughout the documentary.
Mm.
Again, this reckoning, this Barbie reckoning, this like these epitome of American beauty, like coming up against their own outdated like these traditions that like didn't value women for anything more than them being pretty.
Mm.
You know? Really, really fascinating. Honestly, highly recommend for just like the reflection. But it was interesting that the entire documentary was filmed during the Venus retrograde and a little bit after, obviously, as well,
Yeah, yeah.
because the full season ends,
But like,
obviously.
but the impetus and the meat of it is really
Yeah.
like this intense training
Yeah.
tryout thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me
So
you don't
that was
value women without
my
telling me you don't value women. Like, for real. Holy
for
shit.
real and being highly, highly, highly.
But okay,
skilled, the
also
best.
imagine going into your dentist's office and being like, the bitch cleaning my teeth is a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader.
Yeah.
Like, something is wrong. Like,
And she didn't even make it. She got
diva.
to the final rounds, but they were like, well, your point is just not enough. You're out. That's how critical these women were.
Isaac, you better hope you don't show up in my fucking orthodontist chair, bitch. Okay?
Exactly.
The things I will do to your
Exactly.
fucking teeth.
It's crazy. And like I mean, honestly, a very wild watch. And I think it really, honestly, some of the best documentaries are the ones that just show you, here it is. Do you see it? Because I see it. Right? And you're supposed to notice that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
That's some of the best document, and that's what this did. Absolutely. It was supposed to be, I think, the Dallas Cowboys and like the chief brand manager and the co-owner, she thought that this was just a branding opportunity, which I'm sure it is.
At the end of the
But
day, yes.
at the end of the day, that's what it is.
At the end of the
But
day,
it's like,
we're talking about it. Like, at the end of the day, we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys and the institution and yeah.
but at the end, but we're also talking about how there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And something needs to change. Something needs to be different. You need to pay the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders a fucking
They should be
full
making
wage.
more money than I make. Like, I'll say
Yeah,
that with my
they
chest.
should-
Like, they should be
They
making
should
more
be
money than me.
so much. I mean, they are so wildly skilled, and they have to do and they bring in their own money. They are a self-sustaining institution that owned by a billionaire. What are you talking about? Okay, I'm sorry. It was just so frustrating watching this, but it was such a reflection of Venus retrograde, and such a reflection of Barbie. And like one of the last things I'll say, is that it was interesting thinking about this idea. One of the final thing that the gods brought me on was watching All of Us Strangers. It was like the last day of, it was like a few days ago, the last day of Pride. And I was like, I want to watch something gay. And so I watched All of Us Strangers with Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott. And I thought it was going to be like, certainly I didn't think it was going to be fun and cute and good baby girl, but I didn't know it was going to be what it was. It is a profound film on grief. Like, so heavy. Like, basically, the main character is like learning to love again in his 40s after his parents got in a car crash when he was 12. Still saying that he like has never been in love, and
Yeah.
he falls in love with someone.
Who,
And
who then?
hey,
Guess,
we're not giving away spoilers, okay? But the basically I had this moment like watching this film, which was like, again, so it was devastating to watch this film.
Yeah.
And it was so good, and everyone should watch it, absolutely. But it is devastating. But like there was a moment, and I think I watched it like end of moon hour, like Saturn hour. And so the Saturn piece of death,
of grief.
grief, like hit me like a ton of fucking bricks. And I, for the first time, and I told you this, John, but like I, for the first time, had a reckoning with, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Like
Which I will
intellectually,
say again was crazy to me, as we are both very strong Saturn people, and I literally
yes,
probably think about it 3 times a day.
but but there's something different
Domicile
about
Saturn versus
thinking.
fallen Saturn.
No,
Anyway,
right.
let's
Yes.
keep
No,
going.
no, absolutely. But there's a certain level of like domicile Saturn, you'll live forever. Aries Saturn, who knows?
Will I make it to my second Saturn return? Who knows?
Who's to say? Who's to say? But also too, like, it's not that I've felt that I was invincible, but there's a difference between thinking about death and like I had a visceral, like I was having an emotional response to grief and death where I had to process what the emotion was because it was only happening physically. And I couldn't figure
Mm,
out what was happening. Like that's how visceral it was. It wasn't, I had to think about it to realize
mhm.
what I was feeling. And it was like, yeah. And I'm not going to give away why it happened, but it was just because it's too much of a spoiler and it's like the whole point of the movie. But it's like, it happened and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die someday. Like, and that's crazy. And like there was a certain level of like, will I be alone? Will I have done anything?
Mm,
Will I have be like could that be tomorrow? Like, you know what I mean? It was just like I have so many more things I want to be doing.
sure.
And I don't know, and I think the way that this relates, like the funny way that it relates is that like this came to me literally today, or no, yesterday, where there's a moment when in the Barbie movie where she's like they're all having their dance party, the Dua Lipa, and she goes, "Have you guys ever thought about death
Die.
and like about dying?" And everybody like stops in their tracks, and like I laughed out loud having that realization that that's what that was.
Yeah.
Um, and like the whole point of that, like that was a huge moment in that movie where like
Mhm.
after that she became sullen. After that she was like processing like who she was, who she wanted to be, and her legacy. And I feel like there is something too, again, like retrogrades and with with returns of like reorienting oneself to what you feel like is your legacy or is like are we doing it right? Are we getting it
Mhm.
right? And I feel like, like the labor unions that are continuing to go on, but specifically the ones that happened during this retrograde of the of actors and writers, like again, they were saying it was about their legacy, not about them
Not
themselves,
about
like
them.
making enough money. It was about people coming up and being able to still make money, right? Doing
Mhm.
this work. It's that like legacy is such a piece of this Barbie story, of such a piece of this Venus story, such a piece of this, also of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. Like it was it was such like this woman was reckoning with
Mm.
what her legacy was because this was her entire life, and now what is she going to do? And the other women who were retired again at 25, um, were retiring and like being like, I just literally have nothing left. This is all I thought I was going to do, and then I just never thought past it.
Mm.
Or they're getting married directly after. That's like the one of the jokes that they say. It's like we're the girl, like the two women. They were like, we're the ones who are not getting married after retiring, and we're just people. So what does that mean? And now how do we see ourselves? It's
Spring
like
by spring.
no, but that's what it was. That's what it seemed like. Apparently, like it's the old-fashioned, very Southern, very Texan specifically way of looking at it. Like it's still that way today, where you did the Dallas Cowboys thing, Cowboys cheerleader thing to like find a husband, or while you were trying to find a husband, just to do a little thing on the side, and then they would get married directly after, and then they had a life. And these women reckoning with the fact that they are not going to be doing that. And who are they now if they don't have that?
At
Because all the women
25.
at
That's
25, straight people are not okay.
yeah,
That's all I'm trying to say.
no.
And I just think so, but I just think that's an interesting like correlation. Like I thought, like I didn't think there was going to be anything from All of Us Strangers that like actually had relevance, but the relevance is that legacy piece. And when was it? When did the premiere happen?
Was it during
During the
Venus?
Venus retrograde.
It's so fun. I've not watched the movie.
Yeah.
I came home from my lunch break one day and Daniel is like a huge movie buff and like watches all these like really weird obscure movies that I'm like, this wasn't good. And he's like, what?
What are you talking about?
Like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, didn't love. Thought it was wildly boring. I'm gonna say it, write me in the comments. Anyway, he was watching this movie. I
Yeah.
don't know where in the movie he was. I don't think he was that far. He had like
Yeah.
met the guy. I don't know when that
Yeah.
happens in the movie,
Yeah.
but he had like met the guy and was like talking to the guy. And I'm like, I'm also the worst
The
person.
main character had started like,
Had
the guy
met
that
the
he's
love
falling in love
interest.
with.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
right.
yeah. And I am the worst to watch movies with because I always predict the ending. Like I always know what's gonna happen. And so I'm leaving from my house. I gave him a kiss goodbye and I said, oh, you know that this is going to happen at the end, right? And he's like, really? You think so? And I was like, yeah, given the 25 minutes of this movie that I've seen, absolutely. And then he texts me like when it finishes and he's like, fuck you. I was like, girl, so obvious. Why? Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, truly such a good film. But it was interesting. Yeah, like I was like, why am I drawn to this film today, right now? Obviously, queerness, but it was like they premiered August 31st in the middle of the Venus retrograde.
Mm.
Honestly, close to the Gazimi, I think it might have been, like a little bit after it. And then it also, yeah, and also had this idea of legacy, and which seemed for that retrograde, for that Venus retrograde in Leo,
Mm.
there seemed to be a lot of discussions about where do we go from here and how do we shift and change these things, which came up in all of these things that we've been talking about,
Mm. Yeah,
which I love.
yeah, we did it. We talked about Venus retrograde.
We we sure
We did it.
did. But no, please, I think one of the things of like a call to action, I think is like talk to us about, in the comments or like in quote tweets or whatever, talk to us about like what your Venus and Leo experience was.
Yeah. Oh my God,
And
yes. I
like
would love to
how,
like read some at the beginning
yes,
of the next episode and be like, this person had this Venus and Leo experience. Like, please,
yes.
I
No,
live.
absolutely. Let's like commit to that. Like when people like please share your stories when we'll read them at the beginning of the next episode because yes, I mean like those narratives are like such a huge piece. Tell us like where it was happening in your chart, what planets perhaps it was hitting or engaging with
Mhm.
because it's and like what you're thinking about now a year later as this, as this Venus return is happening in Leo.
Mm.
Let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, this episode was very Venus centered, and the next one will probably be very Mars centered,
Malefic Center, honestly.
based on the things that Mars Rahu. Really
Mars Rahu is exactly what it's going
Mars
to be.
Rahu is really going to be the next
We have some
episode.
plans.
So yeah, thank you all for tuning
Thank
in.
you.
We love you. We appreciate you. We want to talk about the transits coming up, but
We're not doing that.
we're not doing that.
You'll figure it out.
It's been an hour and 40. You guys listen to us for an hour and 40 minutes. I think you're good.
I think that's enough of us. You know? Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much. We love you. We'll see you online somewhere.
Bye-bye.
Bye.